Cold War was not just about politics, weapons, or ideology. It was about dominance in space. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a fierce race to prove who could conquer the final frontier first. The Americans had their eyes set on the moon, while quietly, the Soviets looked in a different direction, towards Venus, Earth's nearest planetary neighbor. At first glance, the choice seemed baffling. Venus was a planet hidden beneath thick, permanent clouds, its surface completely invisible to telescopes. Mars appeared far more promising, dry, rocky, and at least somewhat similar to Earth. The moon, on the other hand, was reachable, visible in the night sky, and the natural first step. But for the Soviet Union, Venus represented something even greater, a challenge no one else dared to attempt. If they could succeed there, they wouldn't just keep pace with the Americans, they would leap ahead. So, in 1961, just 4 years after launching Sputnik, the Soviets embarked on an unprecedented campaign, the Venera program. These probes were designed to do what had never been done before, reach another planet, explore it, and, if possible, survive its alien conditions. But if Venus was a symbol of ambition, it was also a graveyard for spacecraft. The first attempt, Venera 1, launched on February 12, 1961. Spirits were high, but only 7 days into the mission, contact was lost. The probe continued drifting silently through the void, never to be heard from again. It was a bitter disappointment, but the Soviets were not deterred. Their response was to try again, quickly. In November 1965, they sent Venera 2. Once more, the probe failed, unable to send back a single byte of data. 4 days later, they launched Venera 3. This probe at least reached its target, slamming into the Venusian surface, becoming the first human-made object ever to impact another planet. But again, no useful data returned to Earth. All 3 missions ended in silence. For most nations, such catastrophic failures would have been enough to step back, reconsider, and perhaps choose a different target. But for the Soviet Union, each failure became fuel. Venus was now more than just a planet. It was a test of will, a frontier they refused to leave unconquered. By the mid-1960s, the Venera program was becoming an obsession. Engineers pushed harder, refining their spacecraft, designing thicker hulls, stronger electronics, and parachutes capable of surviving the unknown conditions beneath those mysterious clouds. And in 1967, the Soviets would finally achieve a breakthrough. On June 12, 1967, they launched Venera 4. This was no simple flyby. The spacecraft was designed to enter Venus's atmosphere and transmit data during descent. When Venera 4 reached its destination on October 18th, history was made. For the very first time, humanity received direct information from another planet's atmosphere. What came back stunned scientists. The probe revealed that Venus was unlike anything we had ever imagined. Its atmosphere was almost entirely carbon dioxide, with crushing pressures more than 90 times greater than Earth's. The surface temperature was a blistering 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. Thick clouds of sulfuric acid hung in the skies, toxic and corrosive. Venera 4 transmitted data for 93 minutes as it fell deeper into the inferno before being crushed by the overwhelming pressure. To the Soviets, this was not a failure, it was a triumph. For the first time in human history, another world had revealed its secrets. But in truth, those secrets were horrifying. Venus was not a paradise cloaked in mist, as some had once imagined. It was a nightmare world of hellish heat and suffocating pressure. Any hope of finding oceans, forests, or even breathable air was gone. Venus was death itself. And yet, instead of discouraging the Soviets, the revelations only deepened their resolve. They were the first to touch this hostile world. They had gone where no one else dared, and they would not stop there. The failures of Venera 1, 2, and 3 had been written off as lessons. The success of Venera 4 proved that with persistence, Venus could be studied. Each mission that ended in silence only fueled the belief that the next one would succeed. The Venera program was no longer just science. It had become a symbol of national pride, a mission impossible that the Soviets were determined to make possible. This was the beginning of a true obsession. Over the next 2 decades, the Soviet Union would launch mission after mission to Venus, each more daring than the last, in pursuit of knowledge and glory. While the Americans looked to the moon, the Soviets stared into the clouds of a planet that promised nothing but danger and tried to make it theirs. The year was 1970, and after nearly a decade of frustration, the Soviets finally achieved what once seemed unthinkable. Venera 7 became the first spacecraft in history to land successfully on another planet and transmit data back to Earth. The descent was brutal. As the capsule plunged through the thick Venusian atmosphere, temperatures soared and pressures mounted. Its parachute malfunctioned, forcing the craft to crash land far harder than planned. Yet against all odds, it survived, long enough to send back 23 minutes of radio signals from the surface of Venus. The data was staggering. The temperature readings confirmed an environment of nearly 900 degrees Fahrenheit, with crushing pressures around 92 times greater than Earth's atmosphere. The signals were faint, distorted, almost as if being dragged through fire and steel, but they were enough. For the first time in human history, information was received directly from the surface of another planet. Venus was no longer a mystery hidden behind clouds. It was real, and it was terrifying. This marked the start of a new phase in the Venera program, not just reaching Venus, but surviving it. In 1972, Venera 8 followed. This probe lasted longer, transmitting for nearly an hour after landing. Its instruments confirmed that sunlight did in fact reach the Venusian ground, though the world it illuminated was no paradise. What filtered through the thick clouds was a dim orange light, an eerie glow more reminiscent of a smoldering furnace than a welcoming day. The probe detected rocks on the surface, but no oceans, no rivers, no signs of the lush vegetation some had once imagined. By the mid-1970s, the Soviets began pushing further. With Venera 9 in 1975, history was made once again. This time, for the very first time, a photograph was taken and sent from the surface of another planet. The image stunned scientists, a field of jagged rocks bathed in a perpetual orange haze stretching into the horizon. The world looked alien, silent, and utterly hostile. Nothing alive could be seen, nothing alive could endure it. Only moments later, Venera 10 landed nearby and captured another photograph, confirming the bleak, rocky landscapes were not isolated. Both probes transmitted data for over an hour before succumbing to the punishing environment. Humanity had its first glimpses of a truly alien landscape, and what those images revealed was sobering. Venus was not a sister world, but a furnace of stone and acid. The breakthroughs did not stop. In 1978, Venera 11 and Venera 12 descended with more advanced instruments. Though their cameras failed, they delivered something equally haunting: the first recorded sounds from another planet. The microphones picked up the eerie rush of Venus's winds, a low, constant, otherworldly howl. For the first time, humanity could hear the atmosphere of a different world, and what it carried was unsettling. But it was Venera 13 in 1982 that would leave the most unforgettable mark. The probe not only landed, but also outperformed all expectations, transmitting for more than 2 hours. Its cameras functioned perfectly, sending back the clearest images ever obtained from Venus. The surface appeared as a cracked orange wasteland strewn with flat rocks and fractured ground. The probe also carried microphones, and what they recorded sent chills through those who listened. The ghostly hiss of the planet's toxic winds, like a desolate whisper echoing across a world of fire. Venera 13 also performed chemical analysis on the soil, confirming that Venus's rocks resembled basalt, solidified volcanic material. This hinted at a planet once shaped by titanic eruptions, a world forged in fire and preserved in hellish conditions. For 2 hours, Earth listened and watched through the eyes and ears of a fragile machine on another planet, until the atmosphere claimed it as it had all the others. Just days later, Venera 14 followed, landing successfully and repeating many of the same achievements. It provided further confirmation of Venus's volcanic nature, capturing more haunting photos of an uninhabitable, scorched plain. By now, the Soviet Union had accomplished something no other nation could claim: a direct sensory connection with another planet. Photos, sounds, soil samples. Venus had been touched, studied, and revealed. But perhaps the most surreal chapter of this exploration came in 1985, when the Soviets launched the Vega missions. These were not just landers, they carried balloons. For the first time in history, instruments would float high within the atmosphere of another planet, drifting in the turbulent skies of Venus. When the Vega balloons deployed, they began to transmit data as they hovered roughly 30 miles above the surface. In this strange, toxic sky, where sulfuric acid droplets formed endless clouds, the balloons floated for nearly 2 full days. They measured winds of up to 240 miles per hour and confirmed that lightning storms raged through Venus's atmosphere. The image was haunting, massive storms tearing through a permanent shroud of acid clouds, with fragile Soviet balloons drifting silently within the chaos. No human eyes saw these scenes directly, but the data painted a vivid picture of a world both alien and apocalyptic. Venus was a realm of constant violence, lightning flashing in skies thick with poison, winds howling at hurricane speeds, and a surface below so hot it could melt metal. These missions marked the pinnacle of the Soviet Union's planetary exploration. At a time when most of the world focused on Mars and the Moon, the Soviets had penetrated the most hostile world within reach. They had been the first to land, the first to photograph, the first to record a sound, and the first to float instruments in another planet's skies. Venus had proven itself a planet of nightmares. Yet through persistence and engineering genius, humanity's first sensory contact with another world had been made possible. Not through human footsteps, but through fragile machines enduring moments of survival in the most extreme environment ever studied. Imagine descending through a thick yellow haze, strapped inside a protective capsule. As you drop lower, the sunlight fades until the world outside your window is a perpetual twilight. The clouds are not soft and white, but dense and sulfurous, thick with acid droplets that corrode metal. The light that manages to break through is distorted, scattering into an eerie orange glow. By the time you approach the surface, it feels less like day and more like being trapped inside a furnace lit with dying embers. The first thing you notice is the pressure. On Earth, you live under one atmosphere of weight from the air above. On Venus, it's like being plunged almost a mile beneath an ocean. Your suit strains against the crushing force, creaking as if it might collapse inward. Every movement feels heavy, as though invisible walls are pushing in from all sides. Without protection, your body would be crushed instantly. Then there's the heat. The moment you step outside, your suit is bombarded by relentless energy. The surface bakes at around 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead and soften steel. Even the thickest shielding struggles to hold back the heat. Within minutes, your visor fogs, your systems strain, and alarms scream warnings. It feels like standing inside a blast furnace with no escape. The air itself is poison. Thick carbon dioxide smothers the planet, mixed with nitrogen and laced with sulfur compounds. If your helmet cracked, a single breath would sear your lungs and choke you in seconds. High above, clouds of sulfuric acid condense into droplets, most evaporating before reaching the ground. Still, your suit sizzles as particles eat away at its outer layers, releasing a sharp stench like rotting eggs and burning matches combined. The landscape stretches out in strange colors. Lava plains hardened into cracked plates, mountains taller than Everest, and sprawling tessera terrain twisted by geological forces. Volcanoes, some perhaps still active, dot the horizon. Yet nothing looks natural. The dense air bends light in bizarre ways. Horizons curve, objects warp, and rocks shimmer before vanishing into haze. It feels as though the planet itself is playing tricks on your eyes. Sudden flashes rip through the skies, lightning storms hidden in the clouds. Thunder never reaches you, swallowed by the thick air, but the bursts illuminate the surface in ghostly flashes before fading back into orange dusk. The silence is suffocating. No sound of life, no breath of wind as we know it. Only the hum of machinery keeping you alive in a place designed to destroy. Minutes feel like hours. The alarms grow louder, your suit weaker, and the heat impossible to ignore. Without technology, survival here wouldn't last beyond seconds. Venus is not just inhospitable, it is a planet that erases trespassers. And yet, despite its horrors, the story of Venus does not end in despair. Long after the Venera landers burned out, new missions continued to peel back its secrets. NASA's Magellan probe in 1989 mapped the surface with radar, showing a world dominated by volcanoes and vast plains. Japan's Akatsuki mission, launched in 2010, still orbits the planet, studying its turbulent clouds and bizarre weather. And the future promises even more. NASA's Da Vinci and Veritas missions, along with Europe's Envision orbiter, are preparing to deliver the most detailed look yet, probing the chemistry of the atmosphere and even searching for traces of a long-lost ocean. Private companies are joining the effort as well. In 2025, Rocket Lab launched a small probe, proof that interest in Venus is spreading beyond government programs. For them, it isn't about rivalry. It's about chasing answers to one of the most profound questions in science. Could Venus, despite its present state, one day support human life again? Clues suggest it might have once been a very different world. Billions of years ago, models show Venus may have had shallow oceans, temperate climates, and skies not unlike Earth's. Something triggered a runaway greenhouse effect, turning it into the furnace we see today. But if it was once habitable, can it ever be changed back? Terraforming ideas are bold, almost unthinkable. Some scientists suggest giant orbital shades to cool the surface. Others propose redirecting icy comets to add water and regulate heat. Chemical schemes imagine pumping hydrogen into the atmosphere to strip away carbon dioxide. And perhaps the most practical vision is not walking on the ground at all, but living in floating cities. Around 50 kilometers above the surface, conditions are surprisingly Earth-like, with pressure and temperature close to what humans can tolerate. Instead of standing on lava plains, colonists could live suspended in the clouds, harvesting sunlight and resources from the air itself. This naturally raises comparisons with Mars. Musk and SpaceX envision building cities on its cold, dry soil. But Venus offers its own advantages: gravity closer to Earth's, natural shielding from radiation, and an environment where floating habitats might be more achievable than carving out life on a frozen desert. The debate between Mars and Venus isn't just technical, it's about which future we imagine for ourselves. Perhaps humanity will split the difference. Mars may become home to surface colonies while Venus hosts cloud cities above its toxic skies. Or maybe one will prove impossible while the other thrives. What is certain is that Venus is no longer ignored. Each mission brings us closer to understanding not only how worlds evolve, but how fragile our own planet may be. And this brings us to the ultimate question. If Earth ever needs a second home, will we walk the dusty valleys of Mars or float above the burning skies of Venus? The future is unwritten, but one thing is certain. The quest to know our sister planet will not stop. For in Venus, humanity sees both a warning of what can happen to a world like ours and a challenge. Can we learn enough, dream big enough, and dare boldly enough to make even the most impossible world our own?